Sir, I already told you, I didn't do anything. Jaden Carter's voice trembled with frustration as the TSA agent gripped his arm, steering him toward a side room near the security checkpoint. His backpack had already been ripped open, its contents scattered across a metal table. People in the terminal stole glances but quickly looked away, uninterested in getting involved. "Save it, kid," the officer sneered, his fingers tightening around Jaden's wrist. "You fit the description." Jaden clenched his jaw. "What description?" The officer ignored him, shoving him into a chair. Across the table, 2 uniformed police officers entered the room, their expressions blank, but their eyes sharp with suspicion. One of them, a burly man with a graying beard, crossed his arms. "What's your business here, son?" Jaden exhaled sharply, trying to keep his voice steady. "I'm flying home. My mom is waiting for me." The officer scoffed. "Yeah? And where's home?" "Washington, D.C., Jaden answered. The other officer chuckled. "D.C., huh? You must be someone important." Jaden didn't respond. He had been through this before. The unnecessary stops, the stares, the subtle accusations that, no matter how innocent he was, made him feel like a suspect. The bearded officer leaned in. "We got a report about a suspicious young man acting nervous near the boarding gates. Someone said you were looking over your shoulder." "Pacing." Jaden rolled his eyes. "I was checking the departure screen. My flight got delayed." The officer slammed a hand down on the table, making Jaden jump. "Watch your tone, boy." Jaden took a deep breath. His heart pounded. He wanted to demand a phone call, but he already knew how that would go. They wouldn't listen. They never did. And then, his phone rang. The screen lit up. "Mom." One of the officers snatched it before he could answer. "Who's calling?" Jaden smirked, despite his anxiety. "You're about to find out." The officer hesitated before answering. "Yeah?" A crisp, commanding female voice cut through the air like a blade. "This is Special Agent Maya Carter of the CIA. You have exactly 30 seconds to release my son before this becomes a federal matter." The room fell into dead silence. The officers exchanged panicked glances. Jaden folded his arms and leaned back. Now this was going to be interesting. The officer holding Jaden's phone visibly paled. He quickly put the call on speaker, his grip tightening as if the phone might burn him. "Ma'am," he started, his voice suddenly less authoritative. "There's been a misunderstanding." "Misunderstanding?" Maya Carter's voice was sharp as steel. "You have my son in custody without cause. I want the names and badge numbers of every officer in that room. Now!" The officer stiffened. The burly one, the apparent leader, cleared his throat. "Ma'am, we received a report of suspicious behavior. We were just following protocol." "Your protocol includes detaining a minor without notifying his legal guardian?" Maya shot back. "Or is it just your protocol when that minor happens to be black?" Jaden watched as the officers squirmed. He had never heard his mother's full interrogation mode in action, but now that he was on the right side of it, it was glorious. "Ma'am, I assure you—" "Save it," Maya snapped. "In exactly 2 minutes, I'll be inside that room. If my son is still in cuffs, you'll be explaining your protocol to the director of the CIA." Jaden bit back a grin. "That's my mom." The bearded officer sighed heavily and gestured for his partner to uncuff Jaden. The metal restraints clicked open, and Jaden rubbed his wrists, deliberately taking his time. A moment later, the door burst open. Maya Carter strode in, all 5'9" of her wrapped in a tailored black blazer, her CIA badge held high. Her sharp brown eyes scanned the room, landing on each officer like a laser sight. "Which one of you laid hands on my son?" No one spoke. Jaden stood and stretched, rolling his shoulders dramatically. "It was that one," he said, nodding toward the officer who had shoved him into the chair earlier. Maya's gaze locked onto the man, Badge number? The officer hesitated. Now. His hand fumbled for his badge. Officer Reynolds, ma'am. Maya nodded. You and I are going to have a long conversation with internal affairs. Jaden smirked. They had no idea who they had messed with. The officer holding Jaden's phone visibly paled. He quickly put the call on speaker, his grip tightening as if the phone might burn him. Ma'am, he started, his voice suddenly less authoritative. There's been a misunderstanding. Misunderstanding? Maya Carter's voice was sharp as steel. You have my son in custody without cause. I want the names and badge numbers of every officer in that room. Now. The officer stiffened. The burly one, the apparent leader, cleared his throat. Ma'am, we received a report of suspicious behavior. We were just following protocol. Your protocol includes detaining a minor without notifying his legal guardian? Maya shot back. Or is it just your protocol when that minor happens to be black? Jaden watched as the officer squirmed. He had never heard his mother's full interrogation mode in action. But now that he was on the right side of it, it was glorious. Ma'am, I assure you. Save it, Maya snapped. In exactly 2 minutes, I'll be inside that room. If my son is still in cuffs, you'll be explaining your protocol to the director of the CIA. Jaden bit back a grin. That's my mom. The bearded officer sighed heavily and gestured for his partner to uncuff Jaden. The metal restraints clicked open, and Jaden rubbed his wrists, deliberately taking his time. A moment later, the door burst open. Maya Carter strode in, all 5'9" of her wrapped in a tailored black blazer, her CIA badge held high. Her sharp brown eyes scanned the room, landing on each officer like a laser sight. Which one of you laid hands on my son? No one spoke. Jaden stood and stretched, rolling his shoulders dramatically. It was that one, he said, nodding toward the officer who had shoved him into the chair earlier. Maya's gaze locked onto the man. Badge number. The officer hesitated. Now. His hand fumbled for his badge. Officer Reynolds, ma'am. Maya nodded. You and I are going to have a long conversation with internal affairs. Jaden smirked. They had no idea who they had messed with. The room, once filled with authority that leaned in the officer's favor, was now suffocating with tension. Except this time, the power had shifted. The lead internal affairs agent, Agent Morris, took a slow, assessing look around the room. His dark brown eyes locked onto Reynolds first, and the officer visibly swallowed. Let's get one thing straight, Morris said, his voice calm but laced with steel. We're not here to take sides. We're here for the truth. But after reviewing some of the airport security footage on our way here, I'd say you all have a lot of explaining to do. Jaden's eyebrows shot up. They'd already seen the footage. That meant the case against these officers was stronger than they realized. Morris turned to Maya. Agent Carter, can you confirm the chain of events as you understand them? Maya nodded. My son, Jaden Carter, was waiting at his gate for his flight to D.C. when he was suddenly approached by these officers and forcibly detained. They searched his belongings without a warrant, restrained him despite no resistance, and failed to provide him with a reason for their actions. I arrived minutes later, identified myself as a federal agent, and found my son physically held down, despite being completely nonviolent. Morris turned toward the officers. Is this accurate? Buzzcut coughed. Well, yes, but we were responding to a report. Morris lifted a hand. Did you verify the report before making physical contact with the suspect? Silence. Jaden smirked. Morris looked unimpressed. Did you have reasonable suspicion to conduct a search of his belongings? More silence. Maya's lips curled into a tight smile. I believe that answers your question, Agent Morris. Morris nodded before turning to Reynolds. Do you understand the severity of what you've done? Reynolds squared his shoulders, trying to salvage what little control he had left. We were acting in the interest of public safety. We had no way of knowing who he was. Maya's eyes flashed. And if he wasn't my son? Would he have had to sit in a holding cell for hours while you investigated? Reynolds had no answer. Morris stepped forward, his presence looming. Here's what's going to happen. You're all going to be placed on immediate suspension while a full investigation is conducted. If we find that excessive force and racial profiling played a role here, there will be consequences. The other officers visibly tensed. Jaden leaned toward his mother and whispered, "I like this guy." Maya gave him a knowing smile before stepping forward. "I also want a formal apology issued to my son, and I expect the department to cover any legal action he chooses to pursue." Reynolds' jaw twitched, but he knew better than to argue. Morris nodded. "I think that can be arranged." He turned to the officers. "Gentlemen, I suggest you start writing your reports. You're going to need them." Jaden watched as the officers stood frozen, their authority stripped away. For the first time since the ordeal began, he felt a real sense of justice. But something told him this wasn't over just yet. The aftermath of the airport incident spread like wildfire. Within hours, leaked footage of the altercation had hit social media, and the internet erupted in outrage. Hashtags like #JusticeForJaden and #racial profiling must end trended nationwide. Jaden sat at the kitchen table, scrolling through his phone in disbelief. "Mom, this is crazy. There's already a petition with over 100,000 signatures demanding those cops be fired." Maya, standing by the counter with a fresh cup of coffee, sighed. "Not surprising. People are tired of this happening. You were lucky, Jaden. Not every black teenager has their mother show up with a CIA badge to stop things before they go too far." Jaden exhaled sharply, knowing she was right. If his mother hadn't arrived when she did, he might have ended up in handcuffs, or worse. His phone buzzed with a new notification. A DM from a journalist at the Washington Post. "Jaden, we'd love to interview you about your experience. Please reach out when you're ready." He glanced at his mother. "I think the media wants my side of the story." Maya set down her mug and folded her arms. "You don't have to speak if you don't want to, but if you do, make sure your voice is heard the way you want it to be." Jaden nodded. He wasn't going to be just another statistic. The fight wasn't over. It was just beginning. By the next morning, the media frenzy had reached a boiling point. News channels replayed the video of the confrontation on an endless loop, dissecting every detail. Talk shows debated the role of racial profiling in airports, while legal analysts speculated on the consequences for the officers involved. Jaden, still overwhelmed by it all, sat across from his mother in their living room. His phone kept buzzing with notifications, messages of support, interview requests, and even threats from people defending the officers. "We need to be careful," Maya said, watching the news. "This isn't just a story anymore. It's a movement." A breaking news alert flashed across the screen. "Authorities announce internal investigation into airport officers following viral incident." Jaden's eyes widened. "They're actually investigating?" Maya smirked. "They have no choice. The pressure's too high now." Just then, her own phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and frowned before answering. "Director Cole, to what do I owe the pleasure?" Jaden straightened. If the CIA director was calling his mother directly, this situation had just reached another level. Cole's voice was firm. "Maya, we need to talk. The agency doesn't want this turning into a bigger issue. We have to control the narrative." Maya's jaw tightened. "Control the narrative? My son was nearly arrested for nothing, and you're worried about optics. Just come in for a meeting. We'll figure this out." Maya hung up and sighed. Looks like they want me to stay quiet. Jaden clenched his fists. Are you going to? Maya met his gaze, determination flashing in her eyes. Not a chance. She had spent her career protecting this country. Now she was going to protect her son and expose the truth. Maya walked into the CIA headquarters with the confidence of a woman who had nothing to prove. Her years of service had earned her the respect of many, but today she could feel the weight of the situation pressing down on her. Director Cole sat at the head of the long conference table, flanked by several high-ranking officials. The atmosphere was tense. Agent Daniels, Cole greeted her, motioning for her to sit. We appreciate you coming in. Maya folded her arms. Let's cut the small talk. What's this really about? Cole sighed. The agency doesn't want this turning into a national crisis. We need to de-escalate the situation before it gets out of hand. Maya scoffed. Out of hand? My son was detained and humiliated because of the color of his skin. And now you want me to stay quiet? That's not what we're saying, another official interjected. But the more attention this gets, the more complicated it becomes. We have partners, international relationships to maintain. Maya slammed her hands on the table. So my son's dignity is an inconvenience to the agency? Cole leaned forward. Maya, we're on your side. But if you keep pushing, you could be jeopardizing your own career. Maya narrowed her eyes. Are you threatening me? Silence. Cole sighed again. No threats, just advice. Choose your battles carefully. Maya stood up. I already have, and I won't back down. As she walked out of the meeting, she knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about Jaden anymore. This was about every black teenager who had ever been profiled, every family that had ever suffered because of injustice, and she was going to make sure the world listened. Maya knew that if she wanted real change, she had to take the fight beyond the agency. That's why, the very next morning, she stood in front of a podium outside the CIA headquarters, cameras flashing and reporters pushing forward, eager to capture her words. Jaden stood beside her, dressed sharply in a navy blue suit. His face was calm, but his clenched jaw and stiff posture showed the weight of the moment. Maya took a deep breath and faced the sea of cameras. My name is Maya Daniels. I am a senior operative for the CIA, and 3 days ago my son, Jaden, was detained and humiliated at the airport for doing nothing but existing as a young black man. Murmurs rippled through the crowd. She continued, her voice unwavering. My son was questioned, treated like a criminal, and forced to prove that he belonged in his own country. And when I arrived, flashing my credentials, only then did the officers panic. Not because they realized their actions were wrong, but because they realized they had targeted the wrong black person. The murmurs turned into gasps. The weight of her words settled over the crowd. I am speaking today because I refuse to let this be swept under the rug. Racial profiling is not just an inconvenience. It is not just a mistake. It is a deeply rooted systemic issue that continues to harm innocent lives. If my son, the child of a high-ranking CIA officer, can be targeted, then what about the thousands of young black men who don't have someone in power to defend them? Jaden took a step forward, clearing his throat. I shouldn't have to rely on my mother's badge to be treated like a human being. No one should. Maya turned back to the cameras, her eyes blazing with determination. I am calling for immediate reform in airport security procedures. I demand accountability, and I will not stop until real change happens. Because if the people sworn to protect us continue to see black and brown bodies as threats first, and humans second, then we are all in danger. The crowd erupted into applause. As Maya and Jaden stepped away from the podium, she knew the battle was far from over. But one thing was certain. She had just sent a message that couldn't be ignored. The press conference sent shockwaves through the nation. Within hours, it was the top story on every major news network. Clips of Maya's powerful speech went viral, with millions sharing and commenting on her call for change. Celebrities, politicians, and activists chimed in, either offering support or trying to deflect from the deeper issues her words exposed. At the airport, the officers involved were placed on immediate administrative leave pending an investigation. But that wasn't enough for Maya. She wanted policy changes, not just temporary suspensions. That evening, Maya sat in her home office, sifting through emails from civil rights lawyers, advocacy groups, and even a few government officials who supported her fight. Jaden sat across from her, his phone buzzing with notifications. "Mom, you're trending on Twitter," he said, a small smirk playing on his lips. "They're calling you the real-life spy, Mom." Maya chuckled, shaking her head. "As long as they're listening, they can call me whatever they want." Just then, her phone rang. She glanced at the caller ID and felt her stomach tighten. It was Director Baldwin, the head of the CIA. "Here we go," she muttered before answering. "Sir." "Maya." Baldwin's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it. "I assume you know why I'm calling. I imagine it has something to do with my public stance." "You put the agency in a difficult position," Baldwin admitted. "We don't usually like our agents making headlines. With all due respect, sir, I didn't choose to be in this position. I chose to protect my son, and if that makes some people uncomfortable, then so be it." There was a long pause. Then, to her surprise, Baldwin sighed. "For what it's worth, I respect what you're doing," he said. "And you should know that your speech put a lot of pressure on Homeland Security. There's already talk of a mandatory review of profiling policies at major airports." Maya's eyes widened. "That's a start." "Just be careful," Baldwin warned. "You've made powerful allies, but you've also made powerful enemies. Change doesn't come easy." Maya exhaled, nodding. "I never expected it to." As she ended the call, she met Jaden's gaze. "This isn't over," she said. "But we're making waves." Jaden grinned. "Good, because I want to see this through." Maya smiled, pride swelling in her chest. They had taken the first step. Now it was time to fight for real, lasting change. A week later, Maya and Jaden found themselves back at the airport. But this time, under very different circumstances. Instead of flashing her badge in the face of injustice, Maya stood in front of a packed press conference, flanked by civil rights leaders, government officials, and high-ranking members of Homeland Security. The Department of Homeland Security had been forced to respond. Under pressure from the media and public outcry, they announced sweeping reforms, including mandatory bias training for TSA and law enforcement officers, increased oversight in airport security, and the creation of a civilian review board to investigate profiling complaints. Maya, as the woman who had ignited the movement, was invited to sit on that board. Standing at the podium, she looked out at the sea of faces, some supportive, some skeptical, and some still resistant to change. She took a deep breath and spoke. "This is not just about my son," she said firmly. "This is about every child, every traveler, every person who has ever been unfairly judged by the color of their skin, their name, their appearance. Today we take a step toward accountability, but this is just the beginning." Jaden, standing in the front row, watched his mother with a mixture of awe and pride. A week ago, he had felt powerless. Now he saw the impact of standing up, of using one's voice, and he knew he would carry this lesson for the rest of his life. When Maya stepped away from the podium, she caught Jaden's eye and smiled. He gave her a small salute, a private gesture between them. As they walked out together, Maya felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Change wouldn't happen overnight. But today, They had won a battle. And that was enough to keep fighting.